I'm 76 years old now, and I've been sitting here lately looking at the phone, realizing how quiet it's gotten and how much of that quiet is my fault. People don't tell you this when you're young. They talk about death like it's a dramatic thing, like it comes with screaming and ambulances and last words, but most of the time it doesn't. Most of the time people just disappear. One day you're thinking about calling them. The next day you hear they're gone. And suddenly the last conversation you had with them becomes the final one, whether it was good or not, whether you meant it to be or not. I used to think I had time. I didn't think I was careless. I didn't think I was cruel. I thought I was busy. I thought I was responsible. I thought I was doing what a man is supposed to do. Work hard, pay the bills, keep the lights on, show up when it matters. And in my head, I always told myself I would slow down later. Later. That word has ruined more lives than people realize. I'm sitting in my kitchen as I tell you this. Same kitchen table I've had for 27 years. The wood is worn smooth where my arms rest. There's a little stain near the edge from a cup of coffee I spilled a long time ago. My wife isn't sitting across from me anymore. She used to sit right there. She'd read the newspaper in the morning, even when newspapers started getting thin and full of nonsense. She liked the ritual of it. She'd fold it carefully like it mattered. She's been gone 4 years now, and I still catch myself turning my head toward that chair when something funny happens on television, like she's going to laugh. It's strange how the body remembers people even when the mind knows better. I thought grief would come in big waves, that it would knock me down all at once. But grief, for me, has been more like a slow leak. It's waking up and forgetting for half a second. It's reaching for a second cup. It's hearing a song in the grocery store and suddenly having to stand still because your throat tightens. It's not the dramatic moments. It's the ordinary ones. That's where they haunt you. And lately I've been thinking about everyone else too. Not just her, my brother, my mother, my best friend from high school, a coworker who used to bring me coffee when I was too tired to even speak. They're gone. And what bothers me most isn't just that they died. It's that I acted like they would always be there. I acted like time was something I could spend and replace. When I was in my 20s, I didn't think about death at all. Not really. It existed, sure. You'd hear about someone's uncle dying or someone's grandfather, but it felt far away, like it belonged to older people, people who were already halfway out the door. I was young, strong, always moving. I got married at 24. Her name was Margaret. Most people called her Maggie. She had dark hair and a sharp tongue, but she was warm underneath it. She could read people like a book. She knew when I was lying to myself. I didn't like that about her at first, but it kept me honest. We didn't have much. We lived in a small apartment that smelled like old carpet and fried onions from the neighbor downstairs. The windows rattled in the winter. The heat barely worked, but we were proud. We'd eat spaghetti and watch the late news. We'd talk about what kind of house we wanted one day. What kind of life? And I really believed it would all unfold exactly the way we planned. That's another thing you don't realize when you're young. You think life is a straight line. You think if you make decent choices, you'll get decent results. But life doesn't move in a straight line. It moves like smoke, one small gust and everything shifts. I got a job at a manufacturing plant when I was 26. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid steady. I started on the floor doing the kind of work that leaves grease in your fingernails no matter how hard you scrub. I liked the feeling of being useful. I liked coming home tired. It made me feel like I'd earned my rest, and I wanted to move up. Not because I wanted to be rich, but because I didn't want to struggle forever. I didn't want Maggie to have to count coins at the grocery store. I didn't want to worry every time the car made a strange sound. So I said yes to extra shifts, yes to weekends, yes to staying late, and I told myself it was temporary, just for now, just until we got ahead. But just for now is another dangerous phrase because now becomes 5 years, then 10, then 20. Maggie would sometimes ask me, "Are you coming home for dinner?" And I'd say, "I'll try." I said that a lot, "I'll try," and I meant it when I said it, I did. But meaning something doesn't always matter. Not when the result is the same every time. I missed birthdays, not all of them, but enough. I missed a few anniversaries, too. I'd show up with flowers the next day and act like it was fine. Maggie would smile, but it wasn't the kind of smile that forgives you. It was the kind that lets it go because she's tired of fighting. We had 2 kids, a boy first, then a girl. I remember holding my son in the hospital. His face was red and wrinkled, like an old man in miniature. He screamed like he was angry at the world for bringing him here. I laughed. I was so proud. I promised myself I'd be a good father, and I was in the way I understood it. I provided. I kept the house warm. I fixed the car. I made sure there was food, but I didn't sit on the floor and play with them as much as I should have. I didn't read as many bedtime stories as Maggie did. I was there, but I wasn't present, and I didn't know the difference. I'd come home exhausted, collapse into my chair, and turn on the television. The kids would run around the living room, showing me drawings, asking me questions, begging me to look. And I'd say, "In a minute." In a minute, I can still hear myself saying it, and the worst part is I can still see their faces when they realized I wasn't going to. They didn't cry. They didn't yell. They just slowly stopped asking. That's how it happens. Not with a big explosion, with quiet adjustments. People adjust to your absence, even when you're sitting right in front of them. My mother used to call every Sunday. She had this habit of talking like she was apologizing for existing. "Oh, I don't want to bother you," she'd say. "I just wanted to hear your voice." And I'd answer while flipping through paperwork or watching a game. I'd say, "Yeah, Mom, I'm here." But sometimes I'd cut the call short. "Mom, I've got a lot going on." And she'd say, "Of course you do. You're busy. You're a working man." She sounded proud of me, and I let that pride be my excuse. She lived alone after my father died. My father passed when I was 33, heart attack. One day he was walking to the mailbox, the next he was gone. I remember the funeral. I remember my mother standing there in black, holding a tissue like it was the only thing keeping her upright. I remember thinking, this is terrible. But I also remember thinking, I'll make more time for her now. And for a little while, I did. I visited more, I brought groceries, I fixed things around her house. But then work got busy again, the kids got older, life pulled me back into its current and I always let it. My mother would say, "Come by when you can." And I heard that as permission to delay, I heard it as no rush. There was always a rush, but never for the right things. My brother Tom was different from me. He didn't care about climbing ladders, he worked odd jobs, he played guitar. Lived like tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. And I used to look down on him for it. I thought he was wasting his life. I thought I was the responsible one. Tom would call me sometimes and ask if I wanted to grab a beer, and I'd say, "I can't tonight," or "maybe next week," or "I'm too tired." He'd laugh and say, "You're always too tired." And he was right, but I wore that tiredness like a badge, like it proved I mattered. Tom died at 58. That number still doesn't feel real to me. 58 isn't old. 58 is supposed to be still living, still planning, still saying, "One of these days." He had cancer. It moved fast. He called me one afternoon and told me. He tried to sound casual about it. "Yeah, they found something," he said. "Looks like it's serious." And I remember sitting at my desk at work, staring at the calendar on the wall. I remember thinking, I can't deal with this right now. Not because I didn't love him, because I didn't know how to stop my life. I didn't know how to pause the machine. I visited him in the hospital, of course, I did. I sat by his bed, I brought him magazines he didn't read, I asked him questions I didn't know how to ask. He looked smaller than I remembered. His hands were thin, his eyes were still sharp, though. He said, "You know what's funny?" I said, "What?" He said, "I always thought you'd outlive me, you were the careful one." I laughed, but it didn't feel right. And then he said something I've never forgotten. He said, "You should come see Mom more." Not angrily, not accusing, just matter of fact, like he was handing me something important before he left, and I said, "I will." I said it quickly like I was swatting away a fly. "I will." He died 2 months later. And when I went to my mother's house after the funeral, she was sitting in her chair, staring out the window. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me for a moment. Then she said, "I've buried everyone." Her husband, her son. Friends, neighbors, and I remember feeling this cold fear in my chest because I realized she was going to die too, and I had been treating her like she was permanent. I started visiting her more after that, but the visits felt different. They felt late, not because she didn't want me there, she did, but because something had shifted. I wasn't coming as a son who had time. I was coming as a man trying to make up for something, and you can't make up for years. You can only show up now and feel the weight of what you didn't do then. My mother died when she was 81. She went quietly, in her sleep. And when I got the call, I remember standing in the hallway of my house, holding the phone, listening to the words and feeling nothing at first. Not because I didn't care, because I was numb. Then later that night, I walked into the kitchen and saw her old recipe box sitting in a drawer. Maggie had kept it, and I opened it and saw her handwriting. Little notes, little stains from flour and butter. And I sat down on the floor and cried like a child, not the polite kind of crying, the ugly kind, because suddenly it hit me. I would never hear her voice again, never. And all those Sundays I rushed her off the phone, those were gone forever. Every "I'll come by soon" that I never followed through on, locked away in time like a door that doesn't open anymore. That's the thing about death. It doesn't just take the person. It takes all the chances you still thought you had, and you don't realize how many chances you've been wasting until the supply runs out. By the time I was in my 50s, my kids were grown. They moved out, started lives of their own. I thought we were fine. I thought I'd done my job, but I noticed something. They didn't call much. They didn't come around unless it was a holiday, and when they did come, they were polite, friendly. But there was a distance, like I was someone they respected but didn't fully know. And I couldn't blame them, because I didn't fully know them either. I didn't know what music my daughter liked. I didn't know what kept my son awake at night. I didn't know who they were when they weren't behaving in front of me because I hadn't been there for the quiet parts of their lives. I was there for the big events, graduation, weddings, but I missed the small moments that build a relationship. And those small moments are the ones that matter in the end, not the photographs, not the speeches. The random Tuesday afternoons, the car rides, the silly conversations. The moments where nothing important happens except connection. I used to think I'd get those later, but later never came, not the way I imagined. And now at 76, I sit in a house that feels too large. I have pictures on the wall, sure, but pictures don't talk back. Pictures don't forgive you. Pictures don't tell you what you missed. They just stare. And I find myself thinking about people I haven't thought about in years. Old friends, men I worked with who used to make me laugh, a neighbor who used to shovel my driveway when my back was bad. One by one they've gone, and I didn't even notice when the last time was. I didn't notice the last handshake, the last joke, the last see you around. Because I assumed there would be another one. I assumed time was generous. Time is not generous. It's quiet. It's sneaky. It doesn't warn you. It just keeps moving, and one day you wake up and the world is missing pieces. And you realize you didn't say what you meant to say, you didn't ask what you wanted to ask, you didn't sit down and listen when you had the chance. You were always in a hurry, always tired, always waiting for the right moment. The right moment never comes. It's not that life is cruel, it's that life is indifferent. It doesn't care about your plans, it doesn't slow down because you're busy, it just keeps going. And if you don't pay attention, it will take everything you love while you're looking the other way. That's what happened to me, and the saddest part is I didn't even realize it was happening, not until the funerals started stacking up. Not until the phone stopped ringing, not until the chairs around the table became empty, not until I became the old one. And suddenly the people I used to rely on were gone, and I was left with my own memories, some of them warm, some of them sharp. Most of them unfinished. And that unfinished feeling, it's hard to explain. It's like carrying a conversation you never got to finish, like holding a letter you never sent, like hearing someone's voice in your head and knowing you'll never hear it in real life again. That's what old age feels like sometimes. Not wisdom, not peace, just unfinished things, and the knowledge that you don't get to go back, you don't get to redo, you don't get to rewind and say, wait, I want to do that differently. You just live with it. When my wife Maggie started getting sick, I didn't understand it at first. It wasn't some dramatic collapse. It wasn't a movie moment. It was small things. She'd forget where she put her glasses. She'd leave the stove on. She'd ask me the same question twice in an hour. At first, I got annoyed. I hate admitting that, but it's true. I'd say, Maggie, you just asked me that. And she'd look at me like she was embarrassed, like she'd done something wrong. Then she'd laugh it off, but the laugh was thin, forced, and I should have known then. I should have taken her hand and said, it's all right, we'll figure it out. But I didn't, because I still thought in terms of schedules, appointments, tasks, fixing things. I thought if I could just get her to a doctor, get a diagnosis, get the right medication, we'd be fine. I treated her like a problem to solve instead of a person who was scared. And I didn't realize how scared she was because she didn't want to burden me. She never wanted to burden me. That was the kind of woman she was. She carried her pain quietly. I look back now and I realize she had been lonely long before she got sick. Not alone. Lonely, there's a difference. You can sit beside someone every night and still feel like you're living your life by yourself. I think she felt that way with me for years, not because I didn't love her. I did. But I loved her the way a man loves something he assumes will always be there. Like a house, like a job, like a pair of boots you've had so long you stopped noticing the shape of them. I didn't cherish her the way I should have. I don't mean in some grand romantic way. I mean I didn't stop and really look at her. I didn't ask her how she was doing and wait long enough for the real answer. I didn't ask her what she wanted from life beyond raising kids and keeping the home together. I didn't sit with her in silence and let it be enough. I always needed to be doing something, fixing something, planning something. Even in retirement, I carried that restlessness like it was stitched into my skin. When I retired at 67, I thought it would feel like freedom. I thought I'd finally breathe, and for the first few months it did. I slept later. I sat on the porch with coffee. I watched the morning light move across the yard. But then I got uncomfortable. I didn't know who I was without work. I didn't know how to just exist. So I started filling my days with chores that didn't need doing. I reorganized the garage 3 times. I built shelves. I mowed the lawn even when it didn't need mowing. I acted like if I kept moving, I wouldn't have to feel the emptiness creeping in. Maggie would watch me sometimes and shake her head. She'd say, "You don't know how to rest." And I'd joke, "Rest is for dead people." I said that once. I said it casually, like it was funny, and she didn't laugh. She just looked down at her hands and said quietly, "Well, you might want to learn." I didn't understand what she meant, not then. A year later, she was diagnosed, dementia. The doctor said the word carefully, like he was setting something fragile on the table. He explained it, talked about stages, talked about progression. But all I heard was the sentence underneath it. "This will not get better." I drove us home in silence. Maggie stared out the window the whole time. When we got home, she went straight to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I stood in the doorway like a stranger. Then she said, "I don't want to forget you." That broke me, not all at once. I didn't cry right then, but something inside me cracked. Because in that moment I realized she wasn't afraid of dying. She was afraid of losing her life while still breathing. She was afraid of becoming someone she didn't recognize. And she was afraid I wouldn't stay. I sat beside her and I told her I would. I told her I'm not going anywhere. And I meant it. But I also knew deep down I didn't deserve her trust because I had spent decades going somewhere else. Not physically maybe, but emotionally, mentally. I had left her alone in the small moments and now I was promising her I'd be there in the biggest one. It felt like trying to build a bridge after the flood already came. The next few years were hard. Not because she became cruel. She didn't. She became softer in some ways, more childlike, more confused. Sometimes she would ask me where the kids were, even though they were grown. Sometimes she would call me by my father's name. Sometimes she would wake up in the middle of the night and walk through the house like she was searching for something she couldn't name. I learned to sleep lightly. I learned to listen for footsteps. And I learned how exhausting love can be when it becomes caretaking. There were days I lost my patience. Days I snapped at her. Then I'd go into the bathroom and stare at myself in the mirror and feel disgust because she couldn't help it. She was disappearing in front of me piece by piece and I was angry at her for it. That's a shame I will carry until I'm gone. One afternoon, I found her standing in the kitchen holding a photo album. She was flipping through it slowly. I walked up behind her and looked over her shoulder. It was pictures of our wedding. The kids when they were small. Christmas mornings. Camping trips. She pointed to one photo of me holding our daughter on my shoulders. She said, "Who is that man?" And I swallowed hard. I said, "That's me." She stared at the picture longer, then she said, "He looks busy." I didn't know what to say because she was right. Even in the photo, I looked like I was rushing, like I had somewhere else to be. And she closed the album and said, "I wish I'd known him better." I don't know if she meant it as a joke. I don't know if she even understood what she was saying, but I understood. And it felt like being punched in the chest, because the truth is she should have known me better. We had been married over 40 years and still there were parts of me she never got. Not because I was mysterious, because I was absent. Not gone, just absent. And now, as her mind faded, I realized the moments I had wasted. All the evenings I could have sat with her and talked. All the mornings I could have lingered instead of rushing. All the little opportunities to show her she mattered more than my job, more than my pride, more than my exhaustion. And I had traded them away without even thinking. I thought I was building a future, but the future isn't a guarantee. It's just a story you tell yourself to justify neglecting the present. The turning point came the day she didn't recognize our home. She walked into the living room and looked around like she was in a stranger's house. She said, "Where are we?" I said, "We're home." And she started crying, not dramatic sobbing, just quiet tears sliding down her face. She said, "I want to go home." And I realized she didn't mean the house. She meant some place in her memory, some safe place that was already gone. And there was nothing I could do. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't work harder. I couldn't solve it. I just had to stand there and watch my wife get lost. And that was the first time in my life I truly understood helplessness, not inconvenience, not difficulty. Helplessness. Eventually, I had to put her in a care facility. People judge you for that. Some people act like it means you didn't love them enough, but those people haven't lived it. They haven't stayed awake night after night. They haven't cleaned up accidents. They haven't watched the person they love turn into someone who's afraid of them. I visited every day, every single day. I'd sit by her bed and hold her hand. Sometimes she'd smile at me. Sometimes she wouldn't. Sometimes she'd look at me like I was a kind stranger, and I'd tell her stories anyway. I'd tell her about the kids, about the weather, about how the neighbor's dog kept digging up my garden. Anything, just to fill the silence, just to feel like I was still connected to her. And then one day I walked in and she was sleeping. Her breathing was shallow. The nurse told me she hadn't eaten much. I sat down and held her hand and I watched her chest rise and fall. And I thought, this is it. This is the end of a whole life. Not just hers, mine too, because when she goes, the version of me that existed beside her goes too. She died that night. I was there. I was holding her hand when it happened. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken clearly in months, but right before she left, her eyes opened. And she looked at me just for a second. And I swear there was recognition, not the full kind, not the way it used to be, but something. Like her soul knew mine, even if her mind didn't. And then she exhaled. And she didn't inhale again, and that was it. 48 years of marriage ended in a quiet room that smelled like disinfectant. No music, no dramatic goodbye, just silence. I walked out of that facility into the parking lot and the world was still moving. Cars passing, people laughing, someone eating a sandwich on a bench. And I remember thinking, how can the world still be normal? How can everything still be here when she is? That's the cruelty of it. Life doesn't pause, it doesn't honor your loss, it just keeps going and you're expected to keep going too. But I didn't know how. After Maggie died, the house felt like a museum. Everything was still where she left it. Her sweater on the back of the chair, her hairbrush in the bathroom drawer, a bottle of perfume under the sink. And for weeks, I couldn't touch anything, because touching it felt like erasing her. But leaving it there felt like living with a ghost. My kids came by more often at first. They brought food. They sat with me, they tried, but they didn't know what to say, and I didn't know what to say either. Grief makes conversations awkward. People want you to heal quickly so they can stop feeling uncomfortable. and you start pretending you're okay just to make them feel better. That's another thing nobody tells you. Sometimes you end up comforting other people about your own loss. Eventually, the visits slowed down, not because they didn't care, because they had their own lives, jobs, kids, stress, and I understood that, I really did. But understanding doesn't stop the loneliness, it just makes it quieter. I started eating meals standing up. I stopped cooking real food. I'd open a can of soup and call it dinner. I'd sit in the living room and watch television shows I didn't even like just to hear voices in the house. And one night I realized I hadn't spoken out loud all day. Not one word. That shook me because I thought of my mother sitting alone waiting for my calls, and I thought, so this is what it felt like. And suddenly I hated myself, not in a dramatic way, just in a tired, honest way, because I realized I had become the thing I ignored. I became the lonely old person, the one you assume will always be there, the one you call when you have time, the one you visit when it's convenient. And now I was on the other side of it. Now I was the one staring at the phone. Now I was the one saying, they're busy, making excuses for people who didn't mean harm but still left me alone. That's when the regret really settled in, not like a sudden wave, more like a weight that slowly sank into my bones. I started remembering little moments, not big ones, little ones. The time Maggie asked me to sit with her on the porch and watch the sunset, and I said I had paperwork to finish. The time my son asked me to come outside and throw a baseball with him, and I said I was too tired. The time my daughter wanted to talk about a boy she liked, and I brushed her off because I didn't know how to have that conversation. The time my brother asked me to grab a beer, and I said maybe later. The time my mother said she missed me, and I said I'd come by soon. All those small moments felt harmless at the time, but now I see them for what they were. They were my life, not the job. Not the promotions, not the money. Those things didn't sit beside me at night. Those things didn't hold my hand when I was scared. Those things didn't know my stories. People did. And I treated people like they were permanent, like they'd wait, like they'd always forgive, like they'd always be there when I finally decided to show up. But people don't wait forever. They get tired. They move on or they die. And then you're left holding nothing but the memory of what you should have done. There are things that can't be fixed. That's the part that hurts the most. Because if you make a mistake at work, you can correct it. If you lose money, you can earn more. If you break something in your house, you can repair it. But if you waste time with someone you love, you don't get that back. You can't call them and say, let's redo the last 10 years. You can't sit across from your dead wife and finally ask her what she wanted from life. You can't go back and be the father you should have been when your kids were still small enough to climb into your lap. That version of life is gone, and you can feel it physically like a missing limb. Sometimes I sit and think about the last time I saw my brother alive. He was sitting on his porch, wrapped in a blanket, looking thin as paper. He smiled at me, and I remember he said, "You made it." That's what he said, like I'd arrived. And I nodded and sat down and talked to him for maybe an hour. And when I left, I said, "I'll see you soon." I didn't see him soon because soon wasn't promised, and I didn't know that, or maybe I did know and I just didn't want to believe it. Now, when I think about him, I don't remember his death. I remember his voice. I remember the way he laughed. I remember how he played guitar badly but with confidence. And I remember how many times I said no to him. How many times I treated him like an optional part of my life instead of a piece of my heart. And that's what regret really is. It isn't just sadness. It's realizing you were given something precious and you handled it like it was cheap. If you're listening to me right now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to give you instructions. I'm not a wise man sitting on a mountain. I'm just an old man sitting in a quiet house, telling the truth too late. But I will tell you what I wish someone had told me. I wish someone had grabbed me by the shoulders when I was 35 and said, "This is it." Not in a scary way, in a simple way. This is your life. These people in your house, in your phone contacts, in your neighborhood, they are not background characters. They are not permanent fixtures. They are not going to wait until you feel ready. They will age. They will get tired. They will drift away if you let them. And some of them will die before you ever think to say what you meant to say. I spent so many years thinking love was something you felt, but love is mostly something you do. It's showing up. It's sitting down. It's listening even when you're tired. It's making the call when you don't feel like talking. It's visiting when it's inconvenient. It's saying, "I'm sorry," before it's too late. It's saying, "I miss you," while they can still hear it. I used to believe that providing was the same as being present. It isn't. Providing is important, yes, but presence is what people remember. Presence is what keeps a relationship alive. And when you're old, presence is what you miss. Not the paycheck, not the reputation, not the title. You miss voices, you miss laughter. You miss the feeling of someone knowing you. I thought I'd be remembered more than I am. That's another truth. When you're young, you think you're leaving some big mark, but most people fade quietly. Your workplace replaces you within a month. Your name gets taken off the door. Your old friends move away or die. And if you didn't build something real with the people closest to you, you end up as a story someone tells once in a while. He worked a lot. He was a good provider. He meant well. Those are not the words you want to be reduced to. Those are the words people use when they don't know what else to say about you. I don't want to be remembered as a man who meant well. I wanted to be remembered as a man who loved well. And I'm not sure I earned that, not fully. Sometimes my daughter calls me now. She asks how I'm doing. Her voice is gentle, but there's still a gap between us. A gap built out of years, and I can't blame her. I built it. My son visits sometimes, and we sit and talk about the weather, about sports, about things that don't matter. And I can feel the real conversation sitting underneath it, waiting. But we don't know how to reach it because we never practiced. We never built that kind of closeness when it would have been natural. Now it feels like trying to learn a language at the end of your life. You can learn some words, but you'll never speak it like someone who grew up with it. I still love them. I love them deeply, but love doesn't erase distance. It just makes the distance hurt more. There's a particular kind of pain that comes with realizing you waited too long. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. It shows up when you're folding laundry and you remember the smell of your wife's hair. It shows up when you see an old couple holding hands in the grocery store. It shows up when you find an old voicemail and press play just to hear a voice that isn't here anymore. It shows up at night when the house settles and creaks and you realize you are the only one listening. I used to think getting old would come with answers. In some ways it does, but the answers aren't comforting. They're simple and they're heavy. The biggest one is this: you don't get as much time as you think. And even worse, you don't know which moments are the last ones. The last time your mother laughs, the last time your brother calls, the last time your wife looks at you and knows your name. The last time your child reaches for your hand, you don't know, so you treat it like any other day. You rush, you postpone, you say tomorrow. And then tomorrow doesn't come, or it comes without them, if this story meant something to you. If it made you think of someone, you don't have to do anything dramatic. You don't have to change your whole life overnight. Just don't assume you'll have time later. Don't assume people will always be there. Don't assume you can say the important things when you're older, because older comes faster than you expect. And death comes quieter than you think. I'm 76 now. Most of the people who shaped me are gone, and I carry their absence with me everywhere. Sometimes I talk to Maggie in my head. Not in a crazy way, just in a lonely way. I tell her little things. I tell her the neighbor painted his fence a ridiculous color. I tell her I finally fixed the cabinet door she always complained about. I tell her I miss her coffee. And sometimes I sit at this kitchen table and I imagine her sitting across from me again, folding the newspaper, smiling that tired smile. And I realize, if I could have one more day, just one, I wouldn't spend it doing anything important. I wouldn't clean the garage. I wouldn't check my bank account. I wouldn't worry about the lawn. I'd sit down with her. I'd look at her face. I'd listen. I'd ask her questions I never asked. I'd tell her things I assumed she already knew. And I would stay, but I don't get that day. I don't get it. All I have now is this moment and the quiet truth that comes with it. I thought I had time. And then the people I loved started dying. And I realized time isn't something you have. It's something you lose. Little by little, until one day you look around and the room is empty. And you understand, finally, what mattered. But by then, it's too late to live it.